Everyone, welcome to the AIPG Town Hall. I'm Dawn Garcia. I'm the 2022 President-elect, and we are going to have a technical talk today. Here in the middle of summer, we thought it'd be time to think about some of our technical subjects. We will have a bit of a business meeting at the end of today's town hall, but first of all, we'd like to focus on geology, and so I'm going to ask everybody to mute unless you are the speaker. And we will have questions at the end, and I'll ask everyone to use the chat as an option during the talk so that you can not forget your questions and we can get prepared. And at the end, we'll make sure we check in the chat for the questions, and also people have an opportunity to ask just by turning on their camera and unmuting. But we will ask people to keep the questions short so that we have enough time to get to as many questions as possible. So I am happy to welcome Steve Stokowski, who is from Georgia. In fact, he is the treasurer of the Georgia section of AIPG. He'll be giving us a talk about a forensic investigation that he conducted. Let me give you a little bit of background about Steve. He is well known, of course, in the mining industry. He's very active in SME. He has a bachelor's degree from George Washington University and a master's degree from South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, both in geology. And he has extensive geologic and petrographic experience across the United States. He is currently the owner and materials geologist at Stone Products Consultants. Through SME, he has received multiple very high-level awards, including being the 2014 recipient of the Herbert C. Hoover Award from the Washington, D.C. section of SME, and he received the 2017 Robert E. Peakarts Award from SME, and he's the past chair of the Industrial Minerals and Aggregates Division of SME. Steve, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Okay, this talk is actually appropriate for the drought we're having in much of the United States. And it's appropriate because of the basic geology that you're going to see at the microscopic level in this particular problem. And it's also appropriate because it has to do with the construction industry and how something that is really simple can degenerate as you go through a project to, in the end, it's widespread failure. So I've called this black granite from hell. And the reason is that the contractor involved in this, who was my client, basically said that this project put him through hell. And it's centered at what was the Rhode Island Veterans Cemetery, which is a large ceremonial and commemorative area. It had a dramatic horseshoe-shaped memorial with sweeping cast-in-place concrete walls, with inlaid 6-foot black granite panels that were going to have all of the veterans' names for Rhode Island, particularly those who would pay, for the family that would pay on the memorial. And during the initial 1998-1999 construction phase, the project was relatively trouble-free, except that there was a problem with the availability of large stone panels, and that delayed the project for 7 months. The original granite specified was something called in gray, a product from, this is the cemetery as looked at the time. Here's a later picture of it. And this is the entrance area, and this is Rhode Island, and this is where it is relative to the rest of Rhode Island. The original material that was wanted, that the architect wanted, was Impala black. And dimension stone is all these fancy names to it. They don't really relate to the geology. and the petrography of the stone. But this particular material was from Rustenburg in South Africa. That was a replacement material for Impala Gray from Zimbabwe, which wasn't available. The material then from South Africa was not available because of sanctions. What to do about that? The contractor was then allowed to substitute an equal and approved product. Now, of the black granites available, the architect approved a very dark and coarse-grained material from Quebec, Canada, Alma area in Quebec. And this was called Parabanca. Now, this approval was based upon 1.5 times 2 foot samples that were supplied by the producer. The material was then installed in the summer of 1999. Now, this was installed on all the concrete panels which were built beforehand. So the concrete panels had cured and stabilized, and then the material was inserted into the panels. Thereafter, the engraver objected to carving the names on the stone panels, saying that the stone panels were not of monument grade material. But he determined of the 1/2 inch to 1 inch diameter minerals in the panels were too weak to engrave with 3/4 inch high letters. So it almost sounds that anybody with knowledge of cleavage would have known this, that the crystal sizes were inappropriate for the size for the carving. But he prevailed and engraved a lot of different stone names, which you can kind of see on the left side of this lower part of this slide. There was some larger words which are engraved. Now, early on, there was some kind of staining of the panels. It started at the top, and that was blamed on the concrete, wash from the concrete. However, I don't believe that that was the case because of some later investigative work that it did. And this is some of the detail on the panels. You can see the inserted granite, the hangers, the overhang at the top. This is the Parabanca material, which is quite black. Now, this is not the same material that was used for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in DC. And this is the material from South Africa and from Zimbabwe. It has different grades and different colorations. This is not as black as the other material, contrasting the two, all black versus the Parabanca. You can also see that the Impala black material on the left here is finer grained than the Parabanca material on the right. The source for this in anthracite is in Quebec, and here's the location with a larger or a smaller scale on the upper right-hand side. There you can see a detail, the geologic map, and the mines that are there, the quarries. Now, there was cracking when I got involved. I got involved on the 14th of September. A client of mine had also got involved before that and then referred the work to me. He was involved 4th, and he counted that 4 of the 58 panels were cracked. When I got there, I counted that 10 of the 50 panels were cracked. And when I came back after approval of contract for work, there were 36 of the 58 panels were cracked. So by the time you have that many panels cracked, this is widespread failure. You can't trust the remaining material. So really, you need to replace everything. That was not going to be acceptable. The supplier was not going to honor any implied warranty or actual warranty on it. There was no inexpensive and amicable solution for this. They thought the Canadians were not going to supply more material into the United States, and the state threw up its hands and basically declared that the project engineer, the design architect, contractor were non-performing on the job and suspended from bidding on state projects for 2 years. This really hurt these companies, and there were many suits. Nobody was happy in the end. The state wasn't happy. The contractor wasn't happy. The architect wasn't happy. I think that the contractor was the one who was vindicated at the end. The state ultimately did redesign the memorial with other suppliers and contractors and architects, and demolished the whole construction and caused the new constructed with stone from another source. And because of the lawsuits, I wasn't privy to any of that information. But when you look at the material, one of the things that you see are there's some whited veins in there. Those turned out to be calcite with antiquarite, which is a serpentine type of mineral. And there are stains related to this cracking. And the cracking extends vertically, horizontally, diagonally. This one here happens to be diagonal. And you can see there's some staining below the cracks. And that's really from kind of weathering of the calcite and actually just slight deposits on the edges of the polished stone surface. There was also pitting. Now, pitting is a dramatic name, a type of defect. These are fairly small. They're roughly quarter-inch in diameter, at most a half-inch. But they're not pits. Pits are something that you rappel into. But everybody likes to be dramatic when there's a widespread failure. So that was what this was all being called. And these are close-up photographs of the polished surface. And basically, these particular mineral grains across here range from that's about, some of our smaller ones are a half-inch. So you can tell that basically you have an entire mineral grain that's being removed from the surface. Interior portion of mineral grain with alteration around it in the surrounding material. But this has not gone through any freeze-thaw cycles. This is all something that just happened over the course of a couple weeks in the summer. You can see too that there's calcite in this material, and there's also a clay, which is more evident in thin section. But one of the things that you have to do when you're doing a project of this nature is the first thing is you do a survey to see whether one of the more common problems that you have with dimension stone would be that there are ore minerals in there that are oxidized and causing expansion and failure and staining. Now, this has a couple of panels with some ore minerals in it, but they're just slightly oxidized. The minerals were actually chalcopyrite, but they hadn't degraded during the course of this installation and investigation. I would expect degradation over the course of several years. But what you do see is you see a lot of what is almost like crazing and broken particles in there, along with some cracks that are white. In the center of this, there's a olive type particle, and there's a couple other ones. And that in particular is enstatite. The material around it that's crazed is bronzite. And both the enstatite in some areas is completely altered to clay, but in other cases, the enstatite is not altered that much, but it's a core of these pyroxenes. And the bronzite is more altered. Here's some of the bronzite down below, and you can see there's some biotite grains in there. And the alteration is in long cracks, and this is in plain parallel polarized light on the left side and cross-polarized light on the right side. And here's the alteration with some cracks in it. The blue areas are blue dyed epoxy. This is plain polarized light and cross-polarized light. And the alteration in this really are clay minerals. There are some cross-cutting veins in here which are light colored, and they're a mixture of calcite and antiquarite. You can see this better in the lower slide where you have cross-cutting material here, which is all antiquarite, and a couple different phases, an outer phase and an inner phase. These orthopyroxenes that are the problem mineral that is altered. Here's the chemical formula. You can see this. The enstatite was the core, and then the bronzite had more magnesium. Here's some of the thin sections that are actually right across this particular mineral grain. In this, you can see in the blue voids there's some residual grains, and that was instantite. And then the bronzite was presumably around, and all that's all gone. And the clay has washed out a lot during specimen preparation, still there, particularly on the outer edges. Here's a match set with the panel up at the top and the altered grains in thin section, and these are pretty big sections across here. This is about an inch. On the right side, you can see it in cross polarizers, and all the white material on the left is calcite in there. But there's a lot of surrounding clay material that expands to greater extent, dependent on my particular samples. Here's another match set, and this one has got, you can see on the upper portion, there are white veins going out and across it, and they're in the thin section too. These are cross sections of the void. So you can see the upper part, which would be here, which is the outside of this, has disappeared in the void. And you have residual grains here, which are cracked and apparently expanding into the void. There's another example with cracks and calcite, secondary calcite, and secondary clay minerals in this particular areas of instantite and some bronzite down here. Now, what's the clay mineral in there? We're able to actually look at that with EDS and identify that by back calculation as being saponite. Now, saponite is not something you come across that often, but it is certainly common in this particular rock. So that's due to that identification of this mineral is due to the fact that it was expanding, and the fact that you can calculate out this saponite as the mineral based on it. It was not due to X-ray diffraction, because that would actually be prohibitive in cost just to try to create that in what were court-approved samples. Now, what's the cause of this? If people are not aware, there's EA and NOAA website out there which has a drought monitor across the United States. And this is in 1999. Red, as you might imagine, is the drought, high drought areas, and the yellow is lesser drought, and the blue is no drought. Well, here's a set across the 1999 is, of course, up in the Northeast. And in June, which is right at the end when they were looking for their punch list to get approved and paid for the whole project, there was drought in much of the eastern U.S., but not so much in Rhode Island. But then rapidly progressed in July, and the South did not have much drought because it did rain, but it moved up into New England, and particularly Rhode Island. And the upper right is July 7th. The middle left is August 3rd. The middle is August 11th. The right is August 24th. And then on September 15th, and a little bit before that, for the early part of the month of September, it started to rain. And you can see in the lower part that the drought has gone away for Rhode Island. Now that the growing of crops, the crops are all parched and all the lawns were parched and everything else was dead in Rhode Island by then. But it was not good at all for this particular project, because if the drought had been maintained for another month, the contract and the losses would have been substantially different, at least for the contractor. He would have had to wait a couple years to try to get paid because he was basically vindicated, but he didn't get that much from this project, where he really put an exceptional effort into building this memorial, being patriotic, etc. And there, but here's the example from August 24th to September 15th. August 24th, Rhode Island is in drought. That's up in the upper right-hand corner. And all the rest of the large portion of the swath of the United States is in drought. But in by September 15th, it had rained substantially up in the Northeast, and then had removed the drought and caused the saponite clay in these panels to basically removing portions of the pyroxenes and causing the panels to crack at the weak link, which were really these calcite saponite veins through it. But the whole panel was expanding and causing cracking at those points that were the weak points in the panel. So that's a real quick version of my talk. Here's how to get in touch with me, and I'm available to answer any of the questions. Now I see just one now.
Steve, would you like to read that question and then comment upon it? Would you like me to read it?
Sure. No, I see it. I see it. I don't think it's suitable as a curling stone, just because it's so coarse. The curling stones tend to be more of a finer grained material with a great interlocking structure, not something that's coarser grained. So they're tougher. If they were coarse like this, they would tend to split and break. I've answered this question to Jim several years ago. I remember talking to somebody about that.
I'm not trying to be impertinent. I just was wondering if you had any information, if you think this was the stuff they tried to use in Canada, or just don't know. But now that you've told us what that unit was, I'm happy to go look myself, just because I'm curious. So thanks all around. I enjoyed your talk.
I don't know where the deficiency in calcium is. In the saponite clay analysis, is that what you're pointing at?
Well, Jim was referring to the black granite in the curling stones, but there is another question asking, is the carbonate actually calcite or perhaps a ferrion dolomite? There appears to be a deficiency of calcium in your geochemistry.
Well, it's calcite because it fits so readily with acid. I did not stain that to determine where it could be a ferroin calcite, which is possible, but it would not be a dolomite.
John and Sarah, you still have your hand up. Did you have a question?
Could you actually, Steve, could you actually see the pitting and the whole stuff with the naked eye, or did somebody need to come in to analyze that something bad was going on?
Could you actually see what?
The pitting that you were talking about in your talk that you showed us on your
You can
slide.
see that there's a clay mineral in there. You can see the calcite. You can see the diorite. You can identify all the pyroxenes, except where they're completely replaced. You certainly can tell that it's an orthosite. Whether the question on the calcite dolomite is answered easily because it was calcite. Now, I did not see it as being necessary to stain this and see whether it was ferroin calcite, but it rapidly reacted with acid, so that identified it as being calcite right away, and dolomite would not react as fast.
Steve, I wanted to ask about this stone. So you said it came from India, and this was a well-known quarry, I imagine. So I was wondering if this issue of the clay alteration and the sapolite, if that was previously known, or do you think it was just in one part of the quarry, and then when they started cutting the stone in that part, that you and perhaps others in the world found out that the stone was actually going to have some issues?
The stone came from Quebec, not from India.
Sorry.
So, but the stone for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial came from India. But this was not on that Vietnam Veterans material. As far as a couple years ago, the Parabonca material was being produced. And I have heard from somebody that there was another in Pacific Northwest, I believe Seattle, that was a building, but with Parabaco on it. But the issue with a lot of this work is that unless it becomes public information because of lawsuits, it doesn't become public information. So I have a suspicion there was another failure, but this one here was a definite failure with it. And I believe that they were supplying smaller panels a couple of years ago from the same area, under the same trade name. But whether it was the exact same area in the quarry, I don't know that.
Okay. Okay, great. And Scott Brandy has a question in the chat. Would such problems occur from time to time elsewhere, as stone blocks may sit out in yards for some time before being sold?
Sure. Hi, Scott. Yes, it could happen. I don't particularly know of any failures in blocks from sitting out and weathering in a quarry. It certainly is conceptually possible. Actually possible for this particular material, and from Quebec before they even prepared it.
Okay, thank you. And Paul Newman from Raleigh, North Carolina has a question.
Hey, Steve, thanks for the talk. I appreciate it. I just kind of missed part of, I guess, what you were saying the cause of the failure was in the rock. Could you just kind of go through?
I'm still not sure about that.
Sorry, can you just go through and repeat that again?
The cause of the failure was that the stone contained a swelling clay that wasn't expanded during preparation nor during installation because the site was in a drought. As soon as it started to rain, the clay started to swell, which caused the panels to crack and buckle. And the progressive. There were just a few panels to start with, and over the course of less than a month, the majority of the panels had cracked. And because at the last count, 36 of the 58 panels were broken, the decision needed to be made to replace all the panels, because you can't plan on any of the remaining panels actually not being defective too. But the state decided that they were just going to throw everybody off the job and demolish the memorial and start again, and let the courts. The expanding clay was saponite.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, we have two more people with raised hands apparently.
Go ahead, Bob Colpitts.
Can you hear me now?
We hear
Yes.
you loud and clear.
Okay, good. All right. I'm curious, is there any evidence from the outcrops of this material that it eroded more rapidly than other materials? Obviously, coarse grained material does not make good monuments, as you alluded to early in your talk. But having had to look for monument material for the whip site in southeastern New Mexico many years ago, one of the criteria was very fine grain, but it should be obvious from just looking at the outcrops around, not actually in the quarry, but around the quarry, if there are any exposures, that this stuff was not going to be very suitable. Was that ever looked at?
Not by me, but I was not involved with collection. site. And I suspected if I had gone to Canada I would have been a non-welcome person.
Okay, we have time only for one more question, then we need to get to our business part. So Matt Rhodes, you have a question.
Yeah, Steve, one thing I'm really curious about is it's the nature of your business and the nature of your geologic consulting, and whether that field is growing, contracting, or kind of staying relatively steady. And the reason I ask is when we met in Salt Lake City, you were already commenting about the building work they were doing across the street from the convention center. And you could obviously just drive by something and see what it was made of and what they were doing. And I haven't run into that career-wise into geologists who do that, but clearly you've been doing it for a long, long time. And I wondered, are there younger people that are coming into the industry? Because there's a lot of decorative stone that's certainly being used in residential stuff and certainly in commercial. But is that field growing, or what's going on, like kind of across the board with your 36,000 foot view of the industry? Is it growing, or what's going on there?
Not many people who are doing microscopic analysis of dimension stone failures or tile failures or natural stone failures of any kind. But there are a lot of people that are getting more and more involved with concrete petrography. And that's really was more of the start of my career in this area. The largest volume of material used out there is concrete, and just because it's so large a volume, there's going to be mistakes and problems. And there's probably around 100 geologists who are involved in concrete petrography in the world, and maybe 60 or 70 of them in the United States. The natural progression is to take that out into other types of failures. Just a couple of years ago, I made a presentation. It was an exciting time to be a petrographer, because with all the new types of materials that are used as binder in concrete and all these different potential aggregate sources that are now being proposed and used on an experimental basis, although people would like to argue with you that it's proven technology. They're being used now, and there's just all kind of failures. Everything is not tested appropriately. We're changing the chemistry of the binders, and rocks are not stable in some of these new chemistries. And the experimental work for determining whether something is stable just really isn't done appropriately, in my opinion.
Right.
It
sounds like you'll be busy for a long time.
You just don't do it.
Great. Well, thank you for your presentation, Steve. That was super interesting. And hey, another career opportunity out there for geologists. So that's always nice to know about. And we are all going to be taking a closer look at our kitchen cabinets and counters when we get done with this. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. So now we're going to move on to the business section or business part of our meeting today. And Wendy Davidson, would you unmute and turn on your camera and tell us about the recent officer elections, please?
All right. So the election results for the 2023 AIPG national officers are the national president-elect for 2023, and the 2024 national president will be Shauna Schmidt from Minnesota section. The 2023 national vice president will be Dennis Pennington from Pennsylvania section. The 2023-2024 national treasurer will be Mark Schaff from Capital section. The 2023 Early Career Professional will be Bridget Petrus from Ohio section. And then the incumbent officers are President Don Garcia from Arizona. The past president will be Matt Rhodes. The secretary for 2022-2023 is John Sorrell from New Mexico. The 2023 past early career professional is Hannah Blaylock from Tennessee. And then also the national editor will continue to be Adam Haft. He won the election. So he will be 23-24 for the national editor. The 4 2023 National Advisory Board representatives will be elected at the AIPG 2023 Advisory Board meeting on Saturday, August 6th in Marquette, Michigan, during the AIPG National Annual Conference.
Well, big congratulations to all of those incoming officers. Certainly looking forward to working with everyone, and also, of course, keeping those 4 outgoing officers busy in AIPG matters as well. Wendy, did you want to talk about the award winners who were recently announced and will be honored during the annual conference?
Sure. So the national awards and the election results and all the awards, national section, presidential, scholarships, students, all this is available on the website as well. So under the news section. So just so you're aware if you want to look at that. The Ben H. Parker Memorial Distinguished Service Medal will be awarded to Scott Tinker from the Texas section. The Martin Van Coovering Memorial Service to the Institute will be awarded to Christine Lelich from the Wisconsin section. The John T. Gailey Senior Memorial Public Service Award will be awarded to Shauna Schmidt from the Minnesota section. The award of AIPG Honorary Membership is awarded to, well, Rick Powers from Montana. John Stewart Memorial Early Career Professional Award is Kelsey Ustapak from Minnesota section. And our Outstanding Achievement Award is going to Dr. Donald Prothero. Our section leadership awards are, we have 1, 2, 3, we have 5. David Abbott from the Colorado section, Clint Noble from the Florida section, Gary Pischke from the California section, Timothy Crumby from the Kentucky section, and Kaylin Briggs from the Michigan section. And then our Presidential Certificate of Merit that will be awarded from Matt Rhodes as the national president this year is David J. Adler for excellent contributions to the AIPG Michigan section as chairman of the Michigan section CPG application process. John Berry for his outstanding contributions to the AIPG Texas section and implementation of the highly successful AIPG Texas section webinar series. And Kate Ziegler for outstanding support and leadership during the February 2022 Executive Committee meeting and field trip in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Our Student Chapter of the Year Award for the 3rd year in a row is going to the Michigan Technological University. Anything else? No, I think that's it. We have scholarship winners and they're listed on the website as well.
Great,
So,
thank you, Wendy.
congratulations.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have an opportunity to name these folks more than once, because we really appreciate all of the service that they give to the profession and to AIPG. So big round of applause, virtual round of applause to everybody. Thank you so much. Congratulations. So I'm going to invite Aaron Johnson to turn on his camera and unmute. We're going to be talking a little bit about some things that have been discussed at the executive board level. And we do have our upcoming business meeting on August 6th. Everybody is invited. That is an open meeting for all members. All of our executive committee meetings are open to all members. So I saw Aaron on the phone earlier, and I see he is still there.
Yeah.
Aaron, are you able to connect? I know that Aaron is traveling, so he might be having some issues, audiovisual issues right now. A reminder that it is not too late to register for the Marquette meeting. So that's the one that's coming up in the Uper, and we can go find Uper lights, and we get to go to the Eagle Mine, and there's going to be great field trips. I cannot wait for the cooler weather personally. And it's just, in-person camaraderie, you just can't beat it with a stick. So Aaron, hi, I see you've unmuted.
Yeah, it took me a minute. I got kicked off just as you said to say hello, so I apologize for that. I am returning from vacation and am headed down the highway in eastern Colorado, so I think I must have been between cell phone towers.
Aaron, would you talk a little bit about the proposal for the membership dues increase? That's something that will be, of course, a subject of discussion at the annual meeting, especially in the XCOM meeting. And we want to make sure that we communicate this proposal to members with plenty of advance notice so people aren't surprised that these discussions are happening. Could you explain a little bit about what you found and what you're thinking, please?
Sure. First off, I want to thank everyone for attending and encourage your input. We do appreciate everything that you bring to the Institute, not just as officers, but as members that are interested in how AIPG functions and what we're doing to move forward. We've been trying to make certain that our dues increases reflect an honest accounting of the cost of maintaining AIPG as what I think of as the premier professional organization for practitioners of geology in the United States. And one of the things that we have found is that the current inflation rates that appear that they might be potentially temporary have not been as transient as everyone had hoped. So we were already in the process of looking at a dues increase because we've tried to do that about every 3 years or so, and to try to keep that within the increases of the cost of doing business. But what we're finding is that increase is going to be a bit more significant than it has been in the past. Typically, in the past, we've looked at about an increase that reflected about a 2.1% annual increase in costs, because that's about what the cost has been in Denver. But the cost in Denver this past year has been just a touch under 9%. It's been about 8.7%. And so we're trying to find ways to address those increased costs without doing so in a way that shocks the AIPG membership, because we certainly don't want to do that. We haven't made any final determinations yet. We have 3 models that Dave Heidloff, the treasurer, and I have been reviewing. I've talked a bit to Dave Rohde, who manages the AIPG investment account, to get his take on how RBC forecasts the current inflation and what they see in 22, the remainder of 22, and then in 23 and into early 2024. One thing I think we have decided is that for the first time in 14 years, we will raise dues in the emeritus category. We don't know exactly how much yet, but we are anticipating that membership category will see a dues increase of either $5 or $10 a year for certain. And the other thing I think for all of us to be aware of is that the early career professional dues are tied to the professional dues. So the ECP dues are 50% of the dues for the professional members. So I think we need to be aware of that as well, that when we increase the professional member dues, there's a proportional increase of 50% to the ECP dues. I hope to have the review of this dues proposal done in the next couple of days so that our leadership team, that would be the 3 presidents, Dawn, Nancy, and Matt Rhodes, can have a look at it as well. And we want to be able to include that in all of the meeting materials so that all of our executive committee can review that in advance. We want their input as well. The thing I would really like to stress is that it's your support that makes AIPG go, and we recognize that, and we do everything we can to manage the money that you provide to us as professionally and proficiently as possible to get every bit of value we can out of the dollars that you see fit to invest in AIPG.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Appreciate that update, and safe travels to you. Thanks for making that extra effort to take a break and get back to cell phone tower, what would you say, input or within range. So
There you go, within range.
yeah. So just want to announce the upcoming town hall meetings. Next month is August. We're all going to be in Marquette, I hope. And I would encourage everyone to think about the making short recordings of why I became a geologist, or what AIPG means to do, or even what do I do as a geologist. I'm thinking, anywhere from 30 seconds to 1.5 minutes. We always need material for our social media, and like to share amongst each other what we do too. So please feel free to pull out your phone and take a video recording the next time you're in the field or in the laboratory in front of a petrographic microscope. So no town hall in August, but in September we will have another technical talk. Nathan Stevens will talk about paths, an overview in the role of geology in fate and transport. So paths has been one of these emerging contaminants for quite a while, and we appreciate Nate Stevens volunteering to give that talk. That will be September 26th, also a Monday. And then in October, we're going to have Mark Rogers and Mark Schaff speak about mentoring, and they are both very involved in our student chapters and the mentoring program. They'll give us an update and really try to focus that for our early career professionals and student members. So that is all from my end. I thank you all very much for being here. It was a wonderful talk. Thank you so much, Steve. We really appreciate your time. And thank you also for Wendy and Aaron for your contributions. I wish you all a great rest of your day. Stay cool out there, and hope to see you in Marquette. Thanks very much, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Waving hands.